actually want to record. So I want to start recording the meetings and then making them available for the faculty who couldn't make it. That way they can pick up whenever their schedule allows. But anyway, so talking with Drew, they're not going to jump onto the call because everything as far as I'll say IT development goes is fine. So everybody who's in our group working on development, things are plugging along as they should. So that's good news. So we're going to get back that 10 minutes and we're going to move on to the next item. So let's see here. Before I forget, actually, how do I want to do this? I'm actually going to have to add a placeholder in the agenda. I actually had an interesting discussion. I'm not going to name, I'll say student names, but so talked with Bill Greshik and Drew Smith, and it appears that we have, I'll say, some issues with academic conduct with a couple of students within our IT program. I came into the sphere of this on Friday. I had a instructor contact me. There was potential plagiarism issue, and I said, "Listen, you really need to take that and kind of, I'll say, throw it over the wall to academic conduct." So the interesting thing was, kind of my conversation with this instructor within IT was, "Listen, I understand there's ramifications to this for you, but at the end of the day, academic conduct is fundamentally started to change. It's really what's happening is we need to rely on them to take an objective review and make sure that everything's evaluated, the evidence that we have, and then let them take the proper course," which is really, and I see Chris on the call nodding. That's really happening. Chris, do you have any commentary since you're on that committee?
Since the leadership change happened with Bill coming in and then Stephanie co-chairing, it definitely has gone to a due process type of system, and we've had implemented hearings, not just where the student comes and appeals. So it's definitely much better than it was beforehand.
Okay.
And so I haven't talked to Bill about what you're referring to, but he did say there are some pending cases happening that obviously I can't talk about. But the process for the whole group is improved.
Okay.
And so we're restructuring how we're being set up and to make sure that we're benefiting and also educating the students at the same time.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thanks for that. And again, to be honest, for full disclosure, I don't even know the names of the students at this point.
Sure.
It's interesting in that, so we've actually had them come onto the radar from two different sources, or multiple sources, I should say. And I kind of bring it up because I kind of want to reiterate that obviously within cyber and IT and things like data analytics and the access to the data that we have and what we do with that, integrity is a very big part of our industry, in my opinion. So to have students do what appears to be happening, obviously we'll let academic conduct, I'll say, measure that, go through their due process and go from there. But it appears that it's pretty significant across multiple courses. So, right. And I bring it up because what and obviously, hopefully as other faculty watch the video when it's made available, is that we do need to focus on, if anything seems fishy and it's in the realm of academic conduct, we really have to kind of, push it to the committee for review. That's really their role. They're the experts on making sure their policies and procedures and academic conduct has been handled appropriately, and then they'll go from there. So, it's interesting in that, I'll say, especially being, so I have a professional investigator background. I know, I'll say, what personalities are out there in the world. Obviously, it's a little bit disappointing if we get students who conduct themselves I'll say, without some integrity. Obviously, again, that's pending review, but
right.
It is important for us to realize that even though students sometimes may sound like there's a reason or a mistake or whatever, we sometimes really need to push that over and let it be reviewed.
Then it takes the onus off of us, and then it goes through the proper process.
Yeah, agreed. And the other thing is that sometimes sometimes a third party review tends to see things that we embedded within this situation have a hard time visualizing or seeing. So
Yep.
it's a very different approach. So anyway.
Yeah.
So take it for what it is, folks. And I know everybody on the call today, I mean, I'm not worried about you guys not pushing things over, but sometimes with adjuncts, you have to kind of reiterate that with them. So that's kind of the point here. So
yeah, one more thing, we're working on some type of integrating that into the training too, as far as educating them about us, the Academic Conduct Committee. So we're working on that in the to be able to provide some either a video or some added to the faculty development day, just to get out there that we're not just secret committee. So just to get to help, that we're really meant to augment and help the educational process.
You're not like a secret society like the Freemasons?
Well, there's the secret handshake.
We had to wait for the white smoke to come out, and then we would know.
That's what I thought, so that's what I'm waiting on, the white smoke to come out on the verdict. And we'll go from there.
Guilty.
Okay, and so for those on computer, I know last time, hang on a second. So last time, we talked about, we need to get the PLO, CLO, et cetera, set up for each course. And so Terry, frankly, I know you're working on some other stuff to wrap up in management. So we're going to basically look to the folks in IT to deal with these that have been assigned for fall. But
okay.
One thing in particular, as we move forward, though, we're going to try to get you involved on these. So, or if you have bandwidth, and you want to kick in, it's up to you.
Right now, I can talk. Absolutely. I just didn't want, if my dogs start barking, it's a little annoying. But
okay.
No, I absolutely plan to do the learning outcomes. What I don't know is, I saw on your agenda, WLO, is that a workload, work level?
The weekly, it's weekly.
Weekly, okay,
yeah,
learning
weekly,
objectives,
so,
okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
so they all have to tie together.
So you have the program course and then weekly objectives.
Correct.
Okay, I was like, what's the W stand for?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the weekly objectives are what I put on the mapping document, though.
Correct. I think one of the problems that we
okay.
have is, I don't know that all of our courses have, I'll say, WLOs and up created. I think there's some that need to be reworked. Like, for instance, I'll say IT. So Tom, you can sound off. IT 407. I don't think that was ever formally developed, right?
Never, not once.
Right. So I'm kind of, so this course is, I'm basically, even though it is, so we're going to rerun the old course in fall, the one that's been out there, what there is of it. And then I've got people working on IT 407. So Zendel's going to be working on that. So we're going to get him focused on building things correctly. But we have some things like, I think like IT 305, IT 335, and in particular, IT 520 can be taught by different people. So what would be nice is if that we can sit down or have somebody basically kind of, in essence, take lead, do an initial mapping, and then kind of corral the troops, and then turn around and then try to get everybody to be like, okay, I'm good with this. Because what you see on screen, for those of you that are on a computer, so like I have listed, here's the classes that should be targeted first. What I'm going to do is get with Diane Fisher. We're going to actually, and I'll show you the template I started to make. I got to do some tweaks to it yet, but we're going to send out the template, one for each course. I know some of you have already mapped items, and that's great. So we'll just get it into the template, and then we actually have to build the portion where we have the summative assessment that we can actually, when the course completes, and let's say if your final exam or your final project is the actual summative assessment, you're going to map out to the CLOs, and then we're going to do doing basically a data reporting on how many students actually met that or met our goal, et cetera. then we'll use that going forward for continuous improvement. So as you can see, there's a number of courses running for fall. I'm not going to read them all, but we also have some in development. So like, for instance, so Chris, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. As you do 408, as well as, I'm trying to think, what is it, 530? You're muted, dude. I can hear you through the wall.
Yes, that is correct. 5:30.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of weird because like you start to say something through the wall and then I hear you on the computer. So it's kind of that like delay. But anyway. Yeah. I'm hanging out with Rod Serling today. So for you, what I'm going to do, anybody who's in, like Toma's working on 405, Zendel's working on 407, Tom, I'm assuming as you do like 533 or 534, what we're going to do is actually just integrate this template into the new course development. And then you just kind of choose where do you want to do that summative assessment and then map it out. And then we go from there.
Yep. I've been doing that with the ID, Jeremy, for 408 and 530. We're identifying that right now. So.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is kind of the game plan, but also like I know, and like on the screen, Chris, I have like you listed because you're teaching 501 in fall, and I know that's been a collaborative effort across you and Tom for rework 501. I mean, if you want to do it, Chris, that's fine. Tom, if you want to pitch in with him or do I
can do it, then have Tom maybe review it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is that cool, Tom? Okay.
Hey, Dave, this is Terry. Is it safe to say a summative assessment you do not want to just be a final exam? That's almost, to me, I interpret that question almost as a semi-philosophical question. Right.
I don't have a problem with what I would say final exams. And my caveat to that is that if it's a technically based course, in my opinion,
you have to be able to demonstrate what they're doing, right?
Correct. So like I'll pick on forensics, I'll pick on like cybersecurity, I'll pick on like Tom's programming classes. I think anybody who's doing a heavy technical course right now, I think what's happening is we're all like, I do a smaller final exam, but I also do a final project where they actually have to demonstrate the skill set.
Okay, good.
And so that's how
I agree with that.
Okay. So, the tough part is when you get into, let's say it's a governance, risk, and compliance class, or it's a class that it's not so technically bound. It might be, maybe it is it can be a final paper. If you have ways, if you have ways to act, if it's a research paper, if you can tie an assessment to it, that's great. Otherwise it can be an exam, or like I said, with technical, it can be a project. So,
or, even with governance or leadership, you can create a policy, you can create, a plan. So it doesn't have to be a paper. So the thing is I'm good at writing just from reading stuff, but that doesn't really test my ability to do it. So I like to make the students apply something, literally apply it. So I'm glad to hear you feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. So if we can get them, to actually fundamentally prove they understand and can demonstrate the skill, in my opinion, that's the way to go.
I also think there needs to be some objectivity, some objective exams, just to balance it, because, if a student says you're unfairly grading them and you point out, well, yeah, but you got a 50 on the midterm. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of like a blend of both. I hope you do too.
Actually, I think I would say there's another good point with that, and that is, like, for instance, some students do better actually with like written exams than they do skill demonstration. It depends on the student. And it depends on, I'll say, you're kind of venturing into like test anxiety and things like that. So I find some students some students do very poorly on a exam, but they do exceptionally well on skills demonstration, because they digest it and can do that differently. And then you may have some who do exceptionally well on a written exam, but they don't do so great on a skill demonstration. So to actually kind of have a mixture of that, like kind of what you recommended, is a nice way that it kind of balances for everybody.
Yeah, and I think too, Dave, that a lot of our stuff, when we're grading, we're stating facts when we're offering critique, not opinions. So like, I've seen some instructors do this, and I'm not a fan of it, where they would say, I think you should have, or whatever. I'm like, I just steer clear of that language and just stick to the facts. And it takes some of that subjectivity when you're doing grading like that completely off the table. So they can't even complain about it. Like, factually, you are wrong because this is what the assignment says. This is what you did. There's a gap here, whatever. So, and I think IT as a discipline kind of lends itself well to that kind of critique, where other disciplines maybe not so much.
Yeah, true. And I guess the question I'm not asking for names. Are you saying that you think that's happening within our IT group?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement. And I think that's probably something, and I know we need to have another big update briefing meeting. And then that should land in that meeting. And as we continue to move towards continuous improvement, I think as these meetings shift, those are topics that we should come back to probably frequently, as we talk about, because the reality is, if you're subjective in how you're assessing something for a student, how are we going to get great continuous improvement in forward progress on that if we're using a highly subjective process?
Right.
Yeah, and Tom, well, rubrics are an answer, but Tom, I think part of the reason we do that is to say to a student, thanks for your submission, you did not do this, this, and this, kind of sounds harsh. Whereas if you coach it in, I believe you would have done better had you applied this, but your point is really well taken. Maybe we need to sometime hash out the correct verbiage for us.
Yeah, I think there's there's always the acknowledging the, a way that I will frame it is, here's feedback on your assignment. And fact one is something positive. Fact two, maybe not something that's positive. And I just kind of balance it out so that it's like, they see the mix of those two things. So it's taken a little bit better. And it's a little, it's a little less touchy-feely, a little more clinical, but it's also very clear.
Right.
A lot of times I'll finish up with like, hey, if you want to revisit anything from this assignment with me, just reach out, and then and we'll go through it so that they know that there's somebody there to coach them, or somebody.
And you're willing to,
to answer any questions that they may have, but you are doing a fact analysis on their work.
Right. Yeah. So my point just was, I don't know that people mean to be, I think you should have, I believe you should have. I think it's just a way to soften in the message, but because I have to watch myself, because then later on they'll say, well, you said you thought I should do that, but that doesn't mean I had to do it. So I've caught myself doing that myself. So good catch.
I have too. And I just, as I've kind of like learned from that, from making those mistakes, I'm like, because it's just, the language just ends up being not clear. And if somebody emails me and says, oh, I was offended by your feedback, I'll get them on the phone and say, listen, I wasn't trying to be offensive, but here, from an instructor perspective, you run into these kind of situations, and like, my intention is to be as clear as possible and unambiguous as possible about where you need to be to improve. And if that comes off as harsh, that's not really my intent. It's really to be clear about opportunities for improvement or things that you should have taken another look at.
Sure.
But
also we get more terse when we're tired, so you get a little fatigue as you're going, and you just start saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So
I'll say this conversation is actually interesting in that I'm probably as guilty as anybody else for using the verbiage in a way that can sound terse at times, and one of the things that and I'll say, and not to pick on you, Tom, I know you and I have had some discussions about, we have a lot of students, especially the ones coming in from community colleges, that they don't always get what I would call adequate or impactful or solid feedback.
Correct.
So then when we turn around and say, listen, what you've done here doesn't hit the mark. Here's what you really should have done. And when you put that on there, even trying to soften that, they can have a pretty adverse reaction at times. And there's a lot of discussion points there, but I think obviously good catch, as Terry said, and that's very true. We may one of the things we may want to do as we go forward is simply say what type of general approach style and how do we want to relay feedback, so that they kind of, I'm not saying we all have to mirror with the exact same language, but if we take a similar approach, I think that once they get into either the grad or the undergrad program, they're probably going to hit like Mahone in Eden first, generally, especially if they're in BSIT. If they're hitting it with feedback the same way that we are, or pretty similar, then they kind of get what happens then is they kind of get in the groove that this is how things are going to shake down. So hopefully we kind of just use that same approach.
Yeah.
Not saying it has to be cookie cutter, but what's the general feel that they can expect as they go through the program?
Right. And at the end of the day, it's about building that trust relationship, and they have to see us as faculty as like their mentors or their advocates. Like and I tell students this all the time in the on-ground classes. I'm like, I'm not telling you this because I'm me. I'm telling you this because I want you to get better. And sometimes that growth process is just painful. And by spending time with them and seeing like, hey, I'm not going to tell you to go just go get better at something. I'm going to enter the tunnel of chaos with you, and I'll help you help you work with a tutor or critique your assignments or whatever it needs to be to help you be successful. But you got to pull your weight.
Here, hang on a second.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom, because sometimes you come from the angle that people are thinking that you're just trying to be mean, super mean person. But I think at the community college level, having taught there, people end up being too easy sometimes, or too afraid to be objective with the facts on the grading. So,
right.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I'll leave it there. I mean, obviously, I think probably we could probably spend multiple meetings kind of discussing approaches and things, and maybe that's something that needs to go on the to-do list. So maybe that's part of one of the integral pieces of maybe that's part of, Tom, you and I have talked about mentoring new faculty when they come in. Maybe that's part of what we do.
Yep. I mean, like for Chris and Terry, who don't know what's going on, I'm working with Ian Kanja on taking over IT 410. So what I'm doing is working with him very closely one-on-one. This is how the course was set up. This is how it was developed. I'm having him grade a couple of sample assignments and see how he is grading and see how he's providing critique and feedback, and then providing critique and feedback for him to help him understand, different nuances of the grading process and help kind of smooth things out for him.
That's cool.
Really good.
Yeah, it's actually, to be honest with you, the whole on-ramping and bringing people. Now, Eden's been here for a while. Obviously, you're kind of leveling them up for the 410 class, but I mean, like we have Toma in the crew. We've had Simcoe come on board. We've got different people that have come on board. And what's starting to evolve is kind of like, what's the procedure? How do we kind of mentor them up a little bit? And it tends to actually, I'll say, shorten their acclimation time. And I think I think what's happening, or at least what appears to be happening, is that there's kind of this rapid impact factor that they hit quicker. I'll say certainly quicker than it did for me. Because frankly, when I started adjuncting, I had nobody trained me on anything.
That's correct. Yeah, that's pretty much our model, is throw people to the sharks.
See, I got lucky. I had Terry and Tom helping out when I was first started.
I was going to say we could at some point create a database of ways to respond to certain situations with students. Because back when I was interim chair over the BIT, I would have new faculty reach out and say, "This student just sent me this email. How do I respond?" And I would craft up something, and say, "You can copy and paste this. That's fine." And they'd be like, "Oh, thank you," because they didn't know how we handled things. So it would kind of be nice if we had a place in Moodle or even on our portal. Just, what do you do when a student gets angry with you? What do you do when a student, asks you for an extension? What do you do when, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a resource for them. We're all into databases, right?
Right.
Nope, not at all.
Not Chris Hyden.
I don't believe in data.
Hey, join the other 99% of the population, Chris.
I am a sheep.
You're such a bad boy.
Man.
So I had to do it.
HR.
I had to do it. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna go back to the let's see here. Where is my meeting controls? There it is. Okay, hang on a second. Let me swap here. Hang on a second. And Terry, I know, you'll get a copy of this sample after, because I'm going to send this stuff out. So so Tom and Chris, do you see a continuous improvement assessment document, IT 462?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay. So this is really roughly, here, I'll change the zoom on that a little bit. So what we have here is at the beginning of it is here's the course learning outcome column. To the right is I have associated programming learning outcomes. So those are there. These obviously I think I'm going to have to review a little bit more, but then, for this particular course, I do a combination of, there is a written exam. Okay. What has to change here is actually, as you watch this live, there apparently are some rubrics that have been developed by Jenny's group for continuous improvement. So I've gotten a copy of that. There's both a grad and undergrad. I'm going to look through those and digest it. And then we're going to have to apply those. So for instance, on the exam, okay, there is roughly, so here's a question, here's the CLO that it's going to measure, and then I'm going to have a rubric and I'm going to have a goal. These are placeholders right now. So I go through that with every portion of the exam, and then of course I have the final project, which I have my requirements there, and then I also map what are the CLOs, and then what's the rubric I'm going to do or use to assess that, and then my target. One thing that we may run into, and we may have to cycle back with Jenny, is that I don't know that the rest of the college is going to have, I'll say, some of the hands-on projects that we do. So we'll have to see. We may be able to use some of the rubrics that they have, but in essence, so really all this is what am I doing with them? What's the CLO that's being assessed? What's the rubric we're going to use? And then what's the target? Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dave, too, on that, I've been trying to get some information about where they stand with Campus Labs and getting that stood up. Campus Labs is the system that they want to use for managing all this data.
Yeah.
And that's going to be used to grade all of the assessments that have to do with programmatic assessment. And one of the concerns, and the reason that I'm concerned about that is because I don't want to run into a situation where we write a bunch of rubrics and then we find that the software can't support it the way that we wrote it. This has happened when Ann was doing outcomes assessment, for example. The way that they wanted the rubrics to be built was not supported by Moodle. So we had to go back and deconstruct a whole bunch of things, which made it impossible. It just made it impossible to get any traction. Well, that was one reason we couldn't get any traction. But I'm concerned about, us going too far down a road and then having to abort and then start over again because of issues with the platform.
So what, I mean, is it safe to assume that they've built rubrics without making sure that the software support it?
I would say this, that there is a risk that is what has been done. And I don't know about you, I have not been able to log into Campus Labs and do anything. And as far as I know, it's not connected to Moodle. And I've been asking for the last couple of weeks, hey, can somebody get me into the system so I can see how the rubrics are built and how these things connect potentially to our assignments and stuff. And so far it's been crickets.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, it's not helpful.
So, all right, well, okay. So, because I actually took I'll say what I originally put in as a placeholder was just really is what's the comprehension level on the and demonstration level on the actual CLO. So was it limited to no? Was it substantial? Was it excellent? You know, kind of low, medium, high is my initial take. We could always start there and then go back and then bring in others if we need to. Because I would assume like a 3-piece Likert scale should be pretty easy to support within like Campus Labs, but you never know, right?
That's what we found out. Like, for example, one of the things that we found out when we first started doing programmatic assessments was that you had to have the same Likert scale across the different criteria, or else it wouldn't work. So if you had a section of your stuff that was weighted higher, so like say in programming, whether or not your program functions is 70% of the grade. Well, in the system and the way that they were doing things before, I actually cannot do that. It had to be everything had to be a 2 or 3 or a 1, say, in order to have that work. I couldn't reweight those things. And then I had to subdivide those criteria in terms of functioning program down to at a way more granular level in order to support the format that the system wanted the rubrics in. So it was a giant pain in the rear. So that's why I'm like,
okay.
We want to have in the back of our minds, like, okay, well, this is what we want to do. And I do, but I want to make sure, like, when we build the rubrics, that we're building them once and not 6 times.
Well, my understanding from Jenny is that where she's going, like I said, I put these in as placeholders, but I actually met with her earlier today and had a discussion. And what she's done is they've prefabricated rubrics that we need to select from.
Okay.
Which would technically then, if every department is using the pre-canned rubrics, then we shouldn't have variances, right?
Yeah, maybe. I have concerns about doing global rubrics that would apply across disciplines, but
right, there's pros and cons. So, but yeah, anyway, so what I'll do is I'll take, and I'm not trying to dismiss you, Tom. I hear you. I think what we want to do at minimum right now, at least in my mind, is let's get the mapping of whatever you're doing for an exam or project or whatever you're doing, let's get it into the template. What CLOs is it measuring on there? Then we can say, okay, here's the rubric section that you're going to use, and then assign a goal that we want to measure against. The goal will be, at this point, I would say somewhat, I think if we're a subject matter expert, we should be able to sit down and make a logical, guess on where do we really want these students at. And then, of course, we go from there. And then as continuous improvement kicks in, we either, we make changes to try to get it to where we need it to be. And if the goal's too low and we're hitting it already, then we need to up the goal.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good approach, Dave. Just focus on the things that are within our control. Is what are our goals and what are the mappings between program learning outcomes and course outcomes, and then the rubric part will fill in.
Yeah, especially if they're gonna mandate that on us, maybe that'll change over time, but we'll roll with that and we'll go from there. So. And if that turns out to be messy, it's not just going to be messy for us. That's the good news.
Yeah. Well, I will say this is that I have concerns about that committee's ability to execute. You know, and I'm not trying to like throw anybody under the bus, but we've had a lot of problems just getting campus labs set up. I mean, we've had a license for the software for a year and we haven't done anything.
Say that again?
We have had a campus labs license for a year and we have done nothing with it.
Well, you know, I'll say, yeah, anyway, I'm just not even gonna go there. I think you know where I sit on that, Tom.
Yep.
So I'll say, especially since we're recording this for later, I'm not going to get into I'll say a philosophical diatribe on the effectiveness of certain areas. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we could certainly go through the Adobe Premiere editor and just clip that part out. But yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, and I'm on that committee, but it's just a difficulty in you understand, like there's a bias at the college in general for discussion versus action, and that's partially what drives things. And you know, in the process of talking about things, we don't execute things. So
oh, Tom, that was excellent. What you just said was excellent. Talk versus action.
Well, the focus is on talking. The focus isn't on problem solving.
I know. That's why it's so frustrating.
You know, frankly, so I know Chris saw my post. I love Miyamoto Musashi quotes, if you've not heard of him. So he is a Japanese Ronin from back in the day. And one of the quotes that I pulled from him recently is, "Truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is, and you must bend to its power or live a lie."
I love it.
And
which explains my cognitive dissonance. Oh, wait, this is being taped. Okay.
No, it does.
I'm going back. I'm going back on mute.
So we're going to have Tom do some editing after this is done. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think that, you know, I guess as a group, you know, and as an industry, IT tends to be more, I'll say good quality IT people are focused on what's really happening and what do we need to do to resolve it. It's, you know, it's basically, you know, kind of your root cause analysis, critical thinking, problem solving. You know, you also have to have a certain degree of situational awareness to identify things and then fix it. As we said, I don't know that that's obviously everybody's, I'll say that's not necessarily programmed in everybody's firmware. So it's what it is. But yeah, back to one of your comments, Tom, we're going to do what we can. We'll get it loaded up and ready. My assumption at this point is, although I feel like we're a little bit farther behind than where I wanted us to be, my impression is that I think we're probably light years ahead of the other departments.
I think that's accurate because we're poised to execute. Like, you know, I'm pushing Drew and Jordan right now. I'm like, get me access to the system. Like, because I could get my courses done with this system. I could get it done in a day. I just need access to the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, I want to be upfront. So my goal for everybody is that by the end of the fall semester, whatever IT courses you're teaching, we're going to be able to run at least we're going to go through an iteration in fall on those courses that run. And then after we get that data back in, starting in January, we will actually formally begin our departmental and continuous improvement process. And we're going to start talking about what did we get, what did we see. We're probably going to spend a lot more time on the group talk classes like IT 520, you know, IT 335, IT 305, et cetera. Those courses, especially since they're taught across multiple instructors, you know, we're going to have to collectively have discussions on what's going right, what's going wrong, and how do we up the ante with that. Whereas the one-offs, like, you know, Tom, you'll have courses, but you'll have feedback that you can review. And I think even beyond the class evaluations or surveys that we get today, hopefully we will have much more impactful data to see, okay, collectively, what does this look like? How are students performing and what do I need to change?
Right.
And I think, you know, for courses that I'm teaching, you know, you kind of see some patterns as you teach it, which is great. But I think once it's all done, you know, sometimes at the end of the semester, just trying to get grades in and completed and the course closed out, you're kind of in a rush with some of the timeframes that they give us. So you're more about getting it done than actually gleaning a ton of, you know, a ton of insights from it. So to actually have a reporting mechanisms where we can go back and even, you know, the other thing is even, you know, let's say it's my course and we bring it up in front of the group here. Once those meetings start, we can, you know, somebody might make an observation. Dave, did you notice this? And then sometimes you miss things because you're too close to it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you get lost in the trees here.
Yeah, exactly. So I think all of this will be good, even if there's issues with some of the rubrics and things like that. I mean, hopefully at the end of the day, like I said, we just want to be ready to go for launch. If they're not ready, I'd rather we're waiting on them than they're waiting on us.
Right.
So anyway, so that's just the document that I'm gonna have Diane build one for each course for fall. We'll send them out, and then we'll start filling these out and getting them back to Diane, and I'll have Diane collate all those, and then we'll start feeding them over to assessment. I don't know, any questions or?
No, I don't have any questions. I would like to spend a little more time with the rubrics, those things that are shareable right now, or no?
Say that again, Tom. I'm sorry.
Rubrics. Are we able to see the rubrics?
Oh, I'll send those out. Yeah, I'll send them out. I would actually love your folks, especially because I think it's right now it's just all full-time people on the call. I would love your review on what do you think of the rubrics that have been built? How applicable are they to our group? And then we can kind of, you know, we're not trying to be critical of Jenny and her people. It's just that we need to look at it from our perspective and say, how does this fit for us? You know, and then we can go from there.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, that's what I wanted to go through for today. So I don't know if anybody has anything else.
No, I can't think of anything. But you know what my world's like.
Yeah, I hear you. So, okay.
Sounds good.
Right, sounds good, folks. I will chat with you all later. So,
Hiding out.
okay, thanks. Bye.